Hello, hello, welcome back again. We have the whole body, whole health. Today's subject is touch. I'm excited for this one. This is part of the 5 series on all the different senses we have called Whole Body, Whole Health. So our mission as the Marilyn Mangum Center, as always, is to enhance and promote good health and well-being through research, education, and services in food science, nutrition, and dietetics. And these are some of our partners that we work with in the community. And the presenters today will be myself, Shelly Salemnia, the registered dietitian here with the Marilyn Mangum Center. And for the activity today, we have Andreas George. He is the garden coordinator as well as the master gardener. So we have an exciting activity with him after this portion. So just to get some things out of the way, some general housekeeping, we welcome all questions and comments. Just make sure to put them in the Q&A box or the chat box, and we'll definitely get to them at the end. But if you have some very specific question that is more related to your individual needs, then we'll refer you to a medical provider or a dietitian. So the objectives for today. We're going to learn about how our health is connected to our sense of touch, the importance of physical activity for our health, and how to get enough nutrition if you're dealing with physical barriers to eating. So food in its essence is very physical. Eating is a physical act that involves all the senses, especially touch. So in order to eat our food, we need a grip, hold, chew, swallow, pick up. Everything is involved. We're feeling everything with our food. A sense of touch really plays an important role in how and also what we eat. And therefore, it affects our overall health and nutrition. So how we eat is really dependent on our touch. So finger food. So we pick up the food with our fingers. We're physically feeling it. We can feel if it's oily, if it's got something on it. But it also makes a difference with the materials we use. So maybe using chopsticks, it's a little bit different feeling, with the way that our hands are touching the chopsticks. Or if our utensils are made of wood or metal or plastic. Even, some people have a different experience drinking out of a bamboo straw just from the way that it feels versus a plastic straw. And it can even make the food fun, picking up food and eating it, or picking up something with chopsticks. It can really change the environment and the way that we're eating just from the way that we're touching and handling our food. And so for some, eating with your hands like around the table creates a sense of community. For example, like chopsticks culturally represents eternal happiness and longevity. Being hands-on, sharing one giant plate with the whole family brings the community together. It's part of sharing a meal. I even read from a food writer, an ancient food writer, that says that when you're eating with your hands, you actually taste the food. When you eat with silverware, you're tasting the spoon or the silver. So the way that we're physically eating can really affect the way that we're viewing the food. So being really hands-on with our food, especially during the cooking process or preparing the food, it helps us feel more connected to the food that we're eating. And being connected to our food really helps us develop a healthier relationship to our food. And our sense of touch also helps us feel the texture of the foods. So is the food crunchy? Is it soft, mushy, smooth, crispy, crunchy? Or if it's like the texture is in the liquid, if it's thin, if it's thick, if it's kind of like a pudding, mashed like this potato. So one food, like a potato, could be crispy like these chips, or it could be soft and smooth like the mashed potatoes. And we even feel this in different ways with the food that we're eating. So some people really love the crunch from the chips, for example, and that crispiness can make the food addicting. Like we can't stop. We want to keep eating more because of the way that the texture of the food feels in our mouth, the touch of the food. It can even like affect the perception of the taste. So maybe something that's more smooth or mushy, or let's say there's like peanut butter that's smooth or crunchy. It can even affect the way that we're tasting it just because of the texture and how it feels. And even then we can taste like the quality of the food. So if there's sushi that just like melts in your mouth, then you know it's a really good quality sushi. Or steak, if it's cooked rare or medium or well, then you can feel the texture as well. If it's really rough, you can even feel it. So with chefs, when they're cooking steak, you know how done it is by touching it. They touch the food. There's a whole method of like feeling how it feels your palm of your hand to know if it's well, or if it's rare, or something in between, just from touching it. And these can really affect how we're eating. So if the food we're eating affects our relationship with food, if we like the food or not, this can play an important role for somebody if they're feeling nauseous or a bad appetite. Some textures can help it, and some textures can maybe make it worse. So that's something to work with as well. And the food texture, the way the food feels, can also tell us a little bit more about the food itself. For example, if the strawberries, like over here on the left, are soft, they're ripe, they're ready to eat, that's something you'd be able to feel. Or if you're going to the supermarket and you see some fish or chicken, you touch the food to make sure it's fresh, it's okay to even take it. If it's been kept at good temperatures, it's something you'd be able to see just by poking the flesh and seeing if it bounces back, or if it's mushy and falling apart, then that's not really something that you want to buy. And our sense of touch also really plays into the temperature of food. So our sense of touch is able to detect food is hot, if it's cold, if it's super icy, if it's been boiling, or if it's just lukewarm. The temperatures can really be sensed from not only our mouths. If it's too hot before we want to drink it, we can touch it, we can hold it, we can feel it, and see how this is for us. So imagine it's a really, really hot day, like we've been having heat waves here. And you hold an ice cold glass of water on that hot day, and how satisfying that is. And then you take a sip of it and it really cools you down, compared to like a lukewarm glass of water at that time, or maybe even any time. Having a lukewarm glass of water isn't so satisfying as an ice cold glass of water is. But at the same time, some people might have sensory issues. Maybe they become very sensitive to certain temperatures. For whatever reason. So by adjusting the temperature of foods, our sense of touch can really be activated, or kind of, adjusting our food to these different things that might be going on. And so during some cancer treatments, or even some immune diseases or some kind of medications, something called mouth sores can develop, as you can see in this picture here. Mouth sores are literally sores that develop all around the mouth. Can be in the lips, it can be in the gums, it can be on the roof of the mouth, even in the throat. And this is where food texture becomes really, really important. So really smooth and consistent foods can help with if you have mouth sores, because some people with mouth sores, they can find it really painful. They have these sores in their mouths, so chewing might be hard, swallowing even if they have it in their throat. Or just something is too many edges, too rough. The texture, the touch of it is just too hard. So having foods that's really smooth and consistent in the texture, and also cold, but not too icy, where it can really put a shock to the mouth. Because the other ones maybe cause pain. So we can adjust the textures of the food and the way that it feels because of this, in order to get enough food inside. Because if you don't getting enough food, then our nutrition really decreases. And if we're at poor nutritional status with weight loss, if we're not getting enough nutrients in, that can really affect our treatments, the cancer treatments. It can affect the timing of treatments, or even how medications are working, or if they need to be adjusted for the dosage. And that can really play a role with healing process as well. So playing around and adjusting with the texture and the temperature of foods, the way the foods feel, can really be helpful for somebody who's having pain with the mouth sores. And then if somebody's having difficulty swallowing or unintentionally breathing in liquids, sometimes the liquids can even be adjusted to prevent choking or breathing it in. Besides like nutritional supplements such as Ensure, Boost, or Gain, these kinds of things, food and beverages can actually be altered to help with getting enough nutrition in. So for example, foods can be blended, they can be mashed, they can be broken down. For example, cauliflower can be broken down into a cauliflower rice, and if it's cooked, it can be super soft. You can make mashed potatoes, and if you mash foods, it doesn't have to be just the potatoes you're mashing. You can make mashed broccoli, you can add in any other vegetables. The foods can be made softer. So if you can imagine something like shepherd's pie has all these mashed and ground consistencies that are super soft, almost like a puree form, but they're still really delicious and getting in a lot of nutrients from that. And smoothies are also a really excellent way to get in more nutrients, more foods into a softer, smoother liquid texture in order to help with this. And then the temperature can also be controlled and adjusted based on whatever needs that the person might be experiencing. And with these smoothies, proteins, vegetables, supplements, anything can be really added, as well as like a medicated syrup to help with the pain. So whether someone's having these mouth sores that's causing pain with chewing, or they're having difficulty swallowing, whether it's because of the sores also or because of any other issue, anything can really be adjusted. So if someone can't have a thin liquid, there's definitely ways to make the liquids thicker. You can play around with different textures and temperatures of foods. And also there's definitely different medications and stuff to help with the mouth sores that could be utilized that we'll talk about a little bit later. So engaging in touch is so important and really, really underrated. Our bodies and minds really thrive when it's stimulated by the touch. So this can range from touching, feeling the touch of water on our skin when we go swimming or you're taking a shower, or, the way that it feels on us. Or even while we're running, the impact of our feet onto the ground, picking up something crumbly, crunchy with our fingers for food-wise, or feeling the plants and the vegetables in our garden. All these experiences of us touching stuff really helps improve the development of our brain, and even development of social bonding and these kinds of things. This touch is super, super important for our brain development. So our sense of touch is really involved in our day-to-day life, involved for exercising and being active. It's really our primary way of just interacting with the world. So it's really important for us to have our sense of touch activated every day. And so by being active, by being exercising and do these physical activities, our mind and our body are being stimulated by our sense of touch, by that running, our foot pounding on the floor, like we said, any kind of activity or feeling our muscles moving. And at the same time, we're improving the circulation of our bloodstream going through our whole body, sending the blood vessels and nutrition to all over our body. And it also helps reduce stress and improves emotional health, and just in general overall well-being. Our sense of touch is involved with all of that. And so our sense of touch is really, really connected to our overall health, especially when it comes into our nutrition. So how we're eating our foods, the textures of the foods, the temperature of the foods, and more importantly, what and how we're eating. So, and with our foods, or the way that we're touching their foods, it's really also there to help us enjoy eating. To really develop this healthy relationship with the food. Don't be afraid to touch your food, to pick it up, to mash it, to play with it. It's all part of the journey of eating. And so the point of it is to really enjoy our food, as well as improving our health and our quality of life as well. So back to this, there's something called, there's a lot of supplements that you can swish and swallow in order to help with this problem that might come up during treatment. So definitely bring it up with a healthcare provider, especially oncologist or oncology team, to get you some kind of medication to help with the mouth sores. So like I said before, there's some kind of coated painkiller that you could swish and swallow to help so you can get down those foods. There's also a supplement, L-glutamine, that you can swish and swallow. So swishing and swallow is going like putting the liquid in your mouth and going and swallowing it so that it coats everywhere. And there's medications to really help with that. And another sense is that the doctors, the oncologists can also change your medication. So whatever they're giving you as a treatment, they can adjust it or give you something else so that you don't have such a bad side effect. And it's really, really important that they would adjust it because, you know, as we said, eating is so important. And if our sense of touch is being disrupted by feelings of pain, for example, especially with eating, then we need to work on it to really get us able to eat, because as we've just discussed, that nutrition is super important at this time. Getting enough nutrition in, eating, enjoying the food as well as getting enough protein, all the micronutrients, just so that we can heal properly and heal in a timely manner and feel strong and be able to fight the cancer with all our strength. So with this, taking the proper medications, talking with the medical team, and also adjusting the food as we just discussed with temperature, with the textures, with all of that we've just talked about, with using our sense of touch, can really be helpful in getting enough nutrition in order to support us during this time. And that's it. Thank you so much. This is our portion for the touch, and as a way to show how our sense of touch is really involved in our health and nutrition, we have our master gardener, Andreas George, is gonna lead us through an activity involving touch into our garden, our wellness garden. So really excited for that, and it's gonna be a very fun activity. Thank you, everybody.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Shelly. That was a fantastic presentation. I do need permission to turn on my video. Fantastic. Hi, everybody. Andreas here. This is your garden coordinator here at the Maryland Macomb Center Wellness Garden. I'm also a UC Master Gardener, and today we're going to talk about starting seeds to transplant in your garden. Now, it is kind of a weird time to start seeds. Right now in Southern California, you're probably thinking about squeezing in the last of your warm season crop seedlings or the beginning of your cool season crop seedlings. The latter especially, if you have a nice indoor space, maybe like a south-facing window or an east-facing window to start your seeds in, or you might have a space with a grow light. And so you'd be thinking about like starting your broccoli and maybe your spinach or your celery, some of like your longer lived warm season, cool season crops in such a location. And for your warm season crops, your warm weather loving crops, you can really only start like zucchini and determine it's made of a shorter cycle warm season crops that don't take as long to mature and that do well from transplant. Now, you can plant beans right now, but I don't recommend starting beans or any legumes for that matter from transplants because they tend to be very sensitive to transplant shock. But we will go ahead and start some zucchini and some tomato seeds today. I think we still have zucchini seeds left. And I just wanted to show you guys this really nifty trick for organizing your seeds. So this is a photo organizer, and we went ahead and alphabetically labeled all of our different categories of warm season seeds. And this is our basically our container for all of our warm season crops. And we have 3 other containers, one for cool season crops, and one for perennials and flowers, and one just for like bulk seeds, like cover crop seeds, legume seeds, that kind of thing. So yeah, you can also start basil right now. Let's see. We'll go through the list. So basil you can start right now. Cucumbers you could probably squeeze in. I would say no eggplant, no melon, definitely not melon. Probably not okra. If you wanted to start a pepper plant right now and attempt to perennialize it and overwinter it, then you can do that right now. Cherry tomatoes, we have indeterminate tomatoes, I should say, which are the vining type tomatoes. Would not do those right now. You want to start those as early as possible in the season. We already have had ours going for a while. But your determinate bush type tomatoes that are done within 90 days, you can definitely start right now because you want them to wrap up before cool weather arrives. And I've heard of people growing their determinate tomatoes into December in Southern California. It's totally possible. You just have to time everything right and give them the conditions they need. Then yeah, your summer squash and zucchini. So let's take a look at some of our tomatoes and see what we have. Okay, so we've got this one that's called Hillbilly. And I'm looking on the back, and it says on the seed packet indeterminate, so we're not going to want to do that one right now. This one is used for our research. Here's an Amish paste tomato, also indeterminate. We have a Burbank tomato, which is a determinate, so this will work right now. So then we have Debrara, which is indeterminate. Tangerine, which is indeterminate. We have Marble Stripe, which I believe is determinate. We have several of those going right now. You kind of have to look into the seed packet to get an idea. It doesn't say on here, honestly. Brandywine mix, these are indeterminates. We happen to have some tomatillos in here as well. Old German, that is indeterminate. Rutgers is determinate. So we can do the Rutgers. And then we have, what's this last one right here? Another Rutgers. So yeah, we'll do these tomatoes. So yeah, these are your bush type tomatoes that will produce in a window of maybe 2 weeks, a month if you're lucky. And they'll produce all their fruit at once and they'll get a massive harvest. Like a lot of these are our slicing tomatoes and our paste tomatoes and our sauce tomatoes, like the Amish paste tomatoes and the what's that Italian variety they used to make tomato sauce? I forget. But yeah, so we'll look at our summer squash, and so we have our we have a couple of our round zucchini seeds left. I really like this variety. Cute, literally like looks like a mini pumpkin. They're adorable. So we'll start some of those as well. Okay, so I'm not going to start any cool season crops today because we don't have a good indoor location to germinate them in. We really just have the office, and there's not enough natural light in the office, and we don't have like a location to keep them. So we're going to wait on our cool season crops. We can definitely get these started today. So before we do that, I want to talk a little bit about different containers and different different methods for starting your seeds, right? And this is probably the one that you may be the most familiar with. These are our nursery 6-packs right here. So your nursery containers, right? And we go to Green Thumb and buy plants every once in a while. And we hold on to these so we can reuse them because you can get several uses out of them before they start to fall apart and you have to throw them out. So you can use these, and they have the benefit of being pretty modular, pretty compact, and this is like a really good, I guess, cell size for like your tomatoes and your squashes and stuff like your zucchini and your cucumbers, sort of like your medium to large size vegetable seedlings. If you're doing something like pumpkins, you're going to want like a 4-inch container or a 4-inch pot, but these work well for a wide variety of seedlings. You can also use them for smaller seedlings like lettuce and basil and spinach and parsley and stuff like that. So those are your standard nursery 6-packs. And another one that I really like are these non-woven PLA nursery pots right here. So polylactic acid nursery pots. And what we have right here, these are really good for longer-lived perennials and fruit trees. So we have some loquat seedlings in this one that I germinated from seeds that I just picked off of that I picked fruit off of a random tree that had fruit hanging over the sidewalk. And I went ahead and planted the seeds, and a couple months later, it's been over 3 months now. Fruit trees take a while to germinate. We have our loquat seedlings, and these will eventually, in 5 to 6 years, become a productive fruit tree. Same thing with some of your other fruit trees. These pots come in a sort of wide variety of sizes. This is an ice cream bean tree, perhaps a lesser-known variety of fruit tree in this area, but this one is a legume as well. So it's a tree legume, which means it's great for mulch, and also makes these delicious fruit that have these bean pods that have like a sweet pulp inside, a sweet fluffy pulp that resembles cotton candy and tastes very tropical. So great fruit tree to grow, and I really love these pots for germinating fruit trees and larger perennials because when they're ready to transplant, you can just plant them directly in the ground. Voila, no transplant shock. Something you won't have to deal with, which is great because transplant shock is one of the biggest issues I would say that we gardeners deal with when getting seedlings into our beds or in the ground. Then we have these flats right here, and so if you're looking to germinate seeds en masse, this is a native plant called deergrass right here. Then this is a great option because you can just scatter a bunch of seeds in here and then individually pluck them out when they're larger. And these ones are beyond ready to be plucked out. And then you will either repot. Usually you'll repot them and give them a little bit of additional care. Maybe you would pop them into one of these PLA pots right here. And then you would put them in the ground once they're established in those pots. Now, I should mention that these claim to be biodegradable, but they're not really. These can only biodegrade in like an actual industrial compost pile. And I would not attempt to, I would definitely not attempt to compost them at home unless you're able to do like, I guess, medium scale pot composting. So don't attempt that. And then I would say my favorite method for vegetable starts would be with this thing right here, which is a soil blocker. And we're gonna get into how to use this. Kind of loud, unfortunately. Kind of squeaky, but once it gets all wet and moistened up with our seed starting mix, then we'll be good to go. All right, so that's a bit about different ways you can start seeds. Now let's talk about making our seed starting mix. And first I want to talk about the difference between soil and potting mix, because the seed starting mixes that you use are going to be a potting mix, not an actual soil. So soils are mineral based, and that's why you can only find real soil in the earth. Soil is derived from sand, silts, and clays that have been enriched by organic matter built by soil biology. There's a whole process for building soil that involves plant roots and organic residues and stuff that we leverage here in the wellness garden to maintain the health of our soil. But a potting mix is designed to replicate the properties of soil without actually being soil. And typically potting mixes are mostly utilize some kind of organic material as their base medium. Usually it's peat moss or coconut coir, might be some type of forestry waste. And we really like to work with the coconut coir here in the wellness garden because it's easy and cheap to get in bulk, and it's also a very sustainable material. So that base material is going to be the material that sort of like forms the bulk of your mixture and holds on to water and nutrients. And so that way the potting mix doesn't dry out, and all the nutrients don't leach out. And then you'll want to have some kind of material to aid in drainage. Usually this is like perlite or vermiculite. I like to use a mixture of both here, and we'll get into those materials. And then you need some kind of material that contains nutrients, like a compost. Typically you'll add a compost of some kind, and I'll go and get into what type of compost we use. So here's our coconut coir right here. So it comes in these big compressed blocks, but you can kind of see, like, once you break it up and moisten it becomes this very loose, like, kind of fibrous, kind of crumbly material, and it holds on to a lot of water. When you add one of those coconut coir blocks to water, it expands by roughly 11 times. And so you get these compressed blocks, then you just basically add water, and that's it. So we'll start by mixing some of that in here to create our seed starting mix. And realize I should have gotten the container to mix it down in, but that's okay. So I'm going to make sure you guys can see me here. I'm going to close this up real fast. Okay, so there's our coconut coir. We have a big, nice container full of it, and you can see, yeah, when it's not fully moistened, it is more clumpy. And we don't want it to be clumpy when we're starting to mix everything. The goal here is to create a very homogeneous mixture, right? So I'm going to add... Looks like there's a bunch of wood chips and stuff in this, but that's okay. We'll just kind of like try and sift them out and work around them a little bit. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, sorry, it's getting a bit dusty over here. 5. 6. And 7. So that will be a pretty good amount, and we're gonna kind of like combine this with other materials to create the ratio that we need, and we'll have a large amount of potting mix available. Now I'm gonna adjust the camera so you guys can see a bit more. Okay, trying and bring it over here. You'll see how I mix up this rooting medium right here, this seed starting mix. And a seed starting mix is going to be very similar to a standard potting mix in its composition, except we're going to go lighter on the nutrients and heavier on the drainage. So we added our coconut coir, that's again our base material. And now we're going to add our compost material. Now typically you would want to use like some kind of hot compost that was made using a lot of green material, so it's really rich in nutrients. That way you don't have to add any additional fertilizer. But what we're going to use, which arguably may be a better material, is this, which is decomposed aged wood chips from the Wellness Garden. So I'm gonna add 6 or 7 of these. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So equal amounts roughly. And this material dried out, so it's not as active and beneficial as it used to be, but it'll regain its activity very soon. And I really love this kind of like fungal compost, these aged wood chips. And I'll get an example of what this material looks like when it's nice and moist and active. And it's really hard to believe that this is the same material, but take a look at this. This is aged rotted wood chips, and this is one of the most fantastic soil amendment or ingredients in potting mixes you could possibly use. That and leaf mold, which is decomposed aged leaves, because they contain a very broad cross section of your soil biome, right? So so that's going to contain a lot of nutrients too, especially our more mineral nutrients, not very high in nitrogen, and so we're going to have to compensate for that lack of nitrogen a bit. Then we have our perlite, which is basically volcanic rock. So this material is very dusty. You want to try not to inhale it. And so I'm going to be very careful while I'm pouring it in. But this helps with porosity, drainage, infiltration. I'm going to get that in like so. And then another material that you could use either perlite or this other material, vermiculite, but I like to use them both. I find that it creates a product that has a bit of a better texture. So we're going to, and we want to add a little bit more of our drainage material than we do our base materials and our compost. Okay, so apologies everyone. Looks like we had some connection issues, but I was mixing the potting mix, the seed starting mix. You can see we've got this wonderful consistency, and I left off on the perlite and vermiculite. So let me tell you what else we added. So we added a half dose of neem seed meal. I mentioned that I like to use this stuff because it's very high in nitrogen, so it helps to make up for the nitrogen, the fact that nitrogen is limiting in the starting materials that we used. And I also added some azomite rock dust for trace minerals. And so what we're trying to get it to is this moisture where it starts to drip water out, but doesn't drip like a constant stream of water out, just like a few drops. We'll know when we get there. But you can see this is a really wonderful material for starting seeds. It's just not quite moist enough yet. So we'll add some more water. And we're gonna go ahead and do that. Probably don't need much more. We're getting really close to the appropriate moisture level for soil blocks, and we'll talk all about soil blocks and why they're the bee's knees. Yep, getting there. Ah, yes, just a little bit more, and that'll be it. Yes, this is a wonderful potting mix. And see how easy it is? You just follow this recipe. I like to say, like, you know, so many things in gardening are just like cooking. Just follow the recipe, come up with a good recipe that you know works. All right, let's see. And it has expanded considerably thanks to the water. And this is a really, really good consistency for seedlings. I would go heavier again on the pour and the compost if it was just a standard potting mix. This could definitely use a bit more water actually. But for seedlings, this is perfect. All right, this ought to do it. it is kind of a delicate balance to achieve, and if we added too much water, we'd have to increase the amount of starting materials we added. We'd have to increase our inputs to absorb that extra water. But I think we hit it right on the mark. And we'll have some very happy seedlings. All right, let's see. Let's see. Perfect. That's it. Okay. So I'm going to bring this down. We're going to talk about soil blocks. But first, before we talk about soil blocks, I do want to circle back a bit. Ooh, that's my eye. Oof. I'm okay. And talk about these again. So another really cool feature of these fabric pots is that they are permeable to the air. And this leads to what's called the air pruning effect. So normally, if you were to grow a seedling in a pot like this that is not permeable to the air, it would continue trying to grow its roots down and out until they hit the bottom of the pot, and the roots would continue growing and start circling around the pot and get tangled up amongst one another. And this leads to a condition called root bound, the plants becoming root bound. And when plants get root bound, their roots become permanently tangled basically, and they will not live up to their full potential as adult plants. But with these fabric pots, what ends up happening is the roots eventually make their way to the side of the container and hit that sort of like potting mix air interface, right? They hit that interface right there. And then the air causes them to die back, and then it stimulates the formation of new roots from the plant. And so eventually the roots will fill out the entire pot, and you'll have no tangled roots and a really strong seedling to boot. So you can achieve the same exact effect with soil blocks for your vegetable starts. That way you don't have to use PLA, which again is not biodegradable actually. So with soil blocks, what we do is we take this press, right? We're gonna take this press and we're going to get this tray first. We're gonna take this press and we're gonna sink it down a couple times into our medium right here. I'm going to make sure that we can see all of everything that's going on because it's really cool. This is also a great way to reduce plastic, which is awesome. All about sustainability. So let's go right here. So we're going to take this press it down a couple times, then scrape off the excess from the sides of the container, put it on here, and very gently depress the plunger and give it a little wiggle, and whoop, there we go. Soil blocks. It looks like I did not insert the, you can see they kind of like are stable, but they will crumble apart if you handle them really roughly. I think what we need actually is a little bit more water, so we'll go ahead and add a little bit more water. And maybe I used too much perlite for this one, but if you just add a little bit more water, let's stick it in. But normally you have, I guess the pegs are not installed, but normally you have these pegs that fit in to create like planting holes. And I guess the pegs are not in on this one. That's fine. Feed the rest of the plants. Okay, because we don't want it to become too moist. It's going to get to that point before you know it. So we want to make sure that we have just the right amount of moisture to keep it stuck together, but not so much that it becomes mucky. It's kind of like that Goldilocks zone sweet spot that you want to hit with this stuff. And it's getting there. That's what we want right there. Okay. Let's try again. So plunger, and I will just roll with it this time and not worry about the little pegs that go in there to make the holes. But there are supposed to be pegs that fit in right there. Shelly, actually, are you editing this? Okay, so I'm not sure where the pegs are, but we'll roll with it this time, and we'll still be able to utilize the soil blocker. So again, just to press it down, and we have the ideal moisture level this time. And then give it a little, just like so. We want to make sure that it's flat on the bottom, just like that. And then there we are. Beautiful soil blocks. And you can see, like, once they reach a good moisture level, you actually can pick them up and they will retain their shape. You just have to handle them very gently. And that's one of the drawbacks of these, is they're quite fragile. But once the plant's established with them, they become a little bit less fragile, and the roots grow within them, and that holds the particles together and everything. So we'll make a bunch of these, and since we don't have the peg, we'll just have to drill some holes in these, which is okay. Now you can see we're going to achieve that same air pruning effect because the sides of the soil blocks have an air potting mix interface, right? And so that way we get super strong seedlings with roots that fill out the entire soil block and that are much less susceptible to transplant shock. Much of transplant shock comes from trying to untangle the roots of root-bound plants, because you kind of do have to tease them apart if you have root-bound plants. But with soil blocks, that's totally unnecessary. Just don't let the seedlings get overgrown, because then all the roots will grow into the bottom of the tray, and you don't want that either. But yeah, so we're going to continue to make soil blocks. And you basically, once they're ready, just pop them straight into your garden bed. Easy peasy. All right, let's see how many rows are we doing. We'll fill out the whole thing, why not? And I think we'll mainly be able to do tomatoes, but we'll do some zucchinis. And yeah, since zucchinis only really take like 55, 60 days to start producing, you have enough time to get away with squeezing in a crop of zucchinis right now, totally. They're relatively tolerant to the cold as far as warm season crops go. So you'll be able to get a crop in, but you can see just like how wonderful this material is. And it's going to be better quality than any potting mix or seed starting mix that you get at the store. If you make it yourself and use good ingredients like this, especially those locally produced and collected composts. Those are critical for having like good soil biology within your rooting medium so that the plants can plug into that biology and get going with it right away. Plants are so dependent on the microbes in the soil more than people realize. So having that local soil biology within your seed starting mix is a major factor for success that you won't be able to get if you're just using a store-bought mix. All right, there we are. So those are our soil blocks. Pretty cool, eh? So I'm gonna go ahead and set this aside. And we're going to start planting our seeds. Okay, so when it comes to planting seeds, you just have to understand a couple things about your specific variety. So you want to know how long it's going to take for that plant to germinate, of course, so you know what to expect. So you know, it's like, okay, well, tomatoes are supposed to germinate in 7 to 10 days. If I don't see something after 20, 30 days, I should be concerned that I might have lost my seeds and did something wrong. So just keep that in mind. So you can look on the seed packet for that information. Usually that information is included. Doesn't say right here how long the zucchini takes, but the tomato should say. This is a bit more detailed. So you can see 8 to 14 days to germination. Your planting depth is 1/4 inch or 6 millimeters. You can plant them deeper if you're starting them outdoors, up to 1/2 inch. But typically the rule that we use is we want to plant our seeds twice the depth of the seed. So here's our zucchini seeds. So you can see we want to plant these rather deep. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and open up these soil blocks. And then I'm going to pop a seed right down in there. Very gently jam it down. That's the one that I moved, so it's kind of falling apart a bit, but that's okay. And this is why you have to have the pegs on the press. And with the zucchini seeds, we want to point them so that the the tip part that has that taper faces down, because that's where the root emerges out of, right? So I'm just being very gentle with it. That one started to fall apart a little bit. In this situation, a little bit more moisture would have helped, but this is for demonstration purposes, so not to worry. I'm sure these will do fine. It looks like we have 8 seeds, which is perfect for these. And normally, like I like to start 2 to 3 seeds per block, just to make sure that we get complete germination and we get at least 1 plant per block, because seeds don't have a 100% germination rate, and your germination rate will vary depending on the plant that you're trying to germinate. And also just your growing practices and the conditions you're starting your seeds in, right? Okay, so we'll continue depositing these into the holes. Yeah, I missed a couple right here. Okay, so we'll just deposit these tomato seeds into the holes that I made. And it looks like we'll need to do a couple of the Rutgers, but that's okay. So I'll use that pack that's already opened. We're gonna need to get more tomato seeds now, aren't we? I'll just double up. Yeah, so again, these are your determinate bush type tomatoes for this time of year, and it's kind of difficult to squeeze in a harvest right now, but you totally can. So you'd rather want to use like an early maturing variety of tomato this time of year, not like a mid to late season variety like Rutgers, but that's okay. This is for demonstration purposes. Okay, so once we deposit all our seeds, you just want to make sure to keep these moist and do not let them dry out. So for soil blocks, what you want to do is water them very gently. You don't want the water pounding down on them, because then they'll just disintegrate. So ideally, you'll want to mist them with a spray bottle, or set them in some kind of flood table or like a tray, or just put some water on the bottom of the tray. Not too much, because if you put too much, they will disintegrate. But we use soil blocks in our hydroponic flood table and find it works very well. Otherwise, mist them. And then yeah, in about 2 weeks, 1 to 2 weeks, you should see some seeds germinating, maybe earlier for the zucchini because they don't take quite as long. And yeah, that's how you start seeds with soil blocks. And yeah, you can use these instead. They're a bit more durable, maybe better for beginners, but I do love the soil blocks. Otherwise, same procedure for these. Just fill them up with soil. Make sure you don't compress it down too much. You want it to still be like light and airy, but you want everything to sit in place. So then you just pop your seeds in, same exact procedure. So that is starting seeds. Thank you for joining me today, and I hope you learned a lot.
Thank you so much, Andreas. Really cool. I hope everybody will be able to take this information, be able to do some kind of container gardening at home. Really applicable. Thanks so much, Andreas.
Yeah, of course. Have a great day, everybody.